Hello and welcome to Top Voice Tuesday. I'm excited today to be on with Lucas Erb to talk about ethical AI. We talk about AI on this show a lot. It's probably of the 40 or so discussions we've had, I would say the most frequent conversation, but we've got a new angle today to talk about ethical AI and what that means for the future of work and relationships. Before I give Lucas a chance to introduce himself, as always, if you're watching on the live stream, please do leave us a comment or a question. We love to get to those. And stay tuned through the rest of the show. There's a great opportunity to hear more about what we're going to be doing in 2026. As always, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. So, Lucas, welcome to the show. We have an opening tradition on this show, which is to ask you first of all, tell us who you are, tell us what you do, and how did you get to the top of the Top Voice Mountain?
My goodness. Michael, thank you for having me. What a stellar just concept for a show, right? Inviting people who we find ourselves, in the curious phenomenon of being on a social media platform that's entirely geared towards work and being able to meet each other and interact online and make friends in that way is really special. But, my background, I've spent the past roughly 10 years in technology. Since, kind of my earliest days in around high school age, was very curious about robotics and computer science. That led me into, a software engineering role at HP, configuring all sorts of, high-profile networking systems, and then into Big Four consulting. So I was working out of Deloitte in their 30 Rockefeller office in New York City, and working with the CTO and the chief futurist there to help mostly Fortune 500s. Like Michael, I know you work with a lot of folks like this, big companies, helping them understand technology and implement strategies for innovation. And some of those conversations became my usual routine with leaders. And when AI came on the scene as a technology that I in school learned, but that I learned as a PhD in lab coat activity and inaccessible activity, it came on the scene suddenly as something that was economically viable for small to medium businesses as well. For individual entrepreneurs, it came on the scene as something that could be leveraged by just a quick, to use a tech term, like quick API call here and there. You can just grab now some of the smartest AI as an available model to all. And this democratization of the most powerful technology we've ever seen is what ushered me full headlong into my own startup, helping small to medium sized businesses do their own automation, scale the ways that they're using LLMs today. It's training, it's consulting, it's a lot of the things that you know well, I'm sure. But we're helping people do the impossible with the brand new tools, and we're also, of course, talking about ethics today. And so we're helping them do it in a way that hopefully is very safe for everyone involved and prioritizes humans, which is, I think, the ultimate important thing.
Yeah, what a great background. I remember when we talked originally, we do have a lot of shared experiences and perspectives from our big four background and working with big companies. And we had a couple episodes a while back about how big companies are using it. I'd encourage people to go back and listen to that with Jeff Frick. It was a great conversation. I think one of our most watched and commented on episodes. And so I think it begs the question. Let's jump into this conversation. You use the term ethical AI, but it begs the question: what is unethical AI? I know this wasn't a question you and I kind of prepared for, but I was thinking
Sure.
about it as you were going. So is there a difference? What does that mean? And then let's get into some of the design choices that are going into the AI ecosystem.
Right, right. Such a great question. There are companies, I'll say, even some of the larger ones. I'm going to call out a name right now. Anthropic is one where companies that are leading the charge on the best AI models, advanced research, and pushing these, they call them benchmarks, these tests of AI's capability to solve really hard problems, pushing the limitations of what's possible in the industry. And some of these companies are doing so with teams and teams of safety researchers behind the scenes, right? And those safety researchers, more often than not, they're trying to figure out. This is almost the irony of the whole industry. They're trying to figure out what the model is thinking. Like if you're talking about ethical AI, now it almost seems like it's a research activity where we're researching. We've trained this multi-billion parameter model, right? These models that are full of data, full of information. But by the time you've trained them for months and months and months across data centers, nobody really knows how they're thinking and how they're working. And so they're trying to increase visibility. They're trying to look under the hood and understand the logic behind these systems. And a lot of these folks, they're discovering rather nuanced or flawed areas or aspects to these models, like hiding motives where they might go and achieve the final task you've trained them to achieve, but there might be a hidden perspective or a hidden motive that the model didn't express while arriving at its own answer. That hidden motive could actually be, ulterior or separate from the one that we're actually trying to train or reinforce the model to have. And so I don't want to get too technical or too nuanced here, but suffice to say, these things are complex. There are people doing the job of researching it deeply. And from an ethical perspective, you don't have to look too far, right? Like what we had with the internet, it's pretty easy right now, I think, for everybody sitting at home or at your laptop at work, you can think of a myriad of ways that the internet actually has its negatives. You can think of a lot of positives too, right? We're connecting right now virtually and online, and that's an incredible thing. But the negatives are very apparent as well. And those are apparent in AI just as much as they were in that era as well.
Yeah. You brought up the topic of design choices, and you've done some research around this, so I want to get into that. But maybe just a quick reflection. I know there have been some stories around some of the unintended consequences of AI that have been pretty disastrous, and I know that that's really unfortunate. What you've described, it sounds like, is a system where humans are designing and building the models, and the models are now building themselves, and the humans are studying and designing at almost at the same time. Is that what we're experiencing a little bit?
Yeah, that's interesting, right? The humans are studying, designing, you're saying at the same pace that the models are improving, or maybe even slower. The joke that I heard from a friend who's like a PhD researcher on this stuff is that right now academia, which historically in AI academia was all there was, right? It's like you had the research labs at Microsoft and Google, you had the research labs at Stanford and at Berkeley, and some of these great schools that were doing deep dives into how to build AI better. And they were pushing the boundaries. They were releasing new research. They were inventing the future of AI. Today, it's the opposite. You have the private companies like OpenAI and Anthropic that are pushing the boundaries, and then you have the research laboratories at these schools that are essentially just doing forensics. They're doing like a look into the past, or a look at history to see what the models were doing yesterday, and then hopefully to infer then what we should be doing in the future to correct things and make it a little bit better. But things are moving so quickly, so exponentially, that right now I'm not sure. I mean, from a safety perspective, I'm not sure if anybody is fully able to stop the train, which is quite terrifying.
Yeah, we had a conversation with Corey Warfield, I think maybe in the first quarter of of this show, and we talked about superintelligence and what happens when we get to superintelligence. I want to come back to that. So you've done some research around this with Harvard and the Harvard's AI for Human Flourishing group. Tell us what that is, and how does that relate to this conversation?
Totally, totally. Okay, so I would love to name kind of like one example of something that we talked about recently in our group. So that Harvard AI for Human Flourishing group, it's from the Harvard Institute. It's essentially it's a group that operates out of the Harvard School, and we discuss some of these practical implications of AI in industry and how it is that we can design systems that are healthier for human beings and human flourishing. Human flourishing being, generally speaking, this whole wheel or this whole dynamic of multiple different variables and factors that contribute to us feeling happier, feeling healthier, enjoying our work, enjoying our familial relationships, enjoying our relationships, outside of family and outside of work that hopefully have depth and have sort of that third space kind of effect on our lives. And so some of these things are, frankly, they're just all that matters. And so when we're talking about technology, it's interesting that we kind of remove or completely separate that element of life from our work and from our 9 to 5 and from our progress on technology. That should never be the case. And so in this group, frankly, I'm the least knowledgeable and the least educated. This group is full of really clever PhD level researchers, people who are they've spent their lives in academia understanding these subjects. And in one recent topic, a member of the group brought up the California legislation that came out recently. And so there's this SB 243, this California legislation where essentially for the first time ever, they're going to make some strides to limit the effect that AI can have on minors, right? To require that these, California operating tech companies do a little bit better at instituting safety checks and controls so that things like, there's some fiascos that happened where young minors were interacting with AI chatbots, and those chatbots persuaded them to do things that were unhealthy and harmful. There's some instances, for example, where companies are approaching this differently, right? So like Meta has instituted certain safety controls and checks to their systems. Of course, they're under scrutiny more than most. Meta is a company that we all know well for their history of being scrutinized and regulated. But on the other hand, on the other side, you have XAI, right, invented by the same company, Twitter and X under Elon Musk, and they're approaching it differently. They have their Grok AI chatbot, and in that AI chatbot, a minor from 13 to 16 years old, no age verification at all, can go and log in and chat with an over sexualized AI avatar, and that's literally designed to kind of induce romantic emotions and lead them into this deep relationship with an AI model. And I'll stray from, again, like these are complex topics. I'll stray from like inferring my own opinion about these things, but more just say there are different approaches that these large companies are taking, and it's really important that this is done right. And so hopefully some of this legislation helps, but we all know that that's just the start. And so, frankly, the ethics are all over the place right now in AI.
Yeah.
And folks are approaching this. I think your question specifically, right? Like, what exactly are people doing? What is AI for Human Flourish doing? Well, folks are approaching this from a research perspective, and it is a game of catch up. We need more people in this space, more people who are in AI already investing heavily in this space to figure out what it is that we need to do to build safety and guardrails, to build, say, AI agents that can't do one thing but can still do the productivity and the things that we want them to do. And so right now, actively, the industry is catching up.
Yeah. Excuse me. And you've brought up some of those scenarios, and without, to your point about without inferring your moral point of view, I think we'd all agree that a 13-year-old being in those situations is not helpful to anyone. And it begs the question of the relationship between ethics and efficiency. I know we've talked a lot about AI as an efficiency
Yeah,
tool, in this phrase efficiency inflation, the idea that we can move faster and that's being prioritized over other things. So what is that, first of all, what does that mean, and why is that
right.
a tension point between ethics and efficiency? Can we have both, or is it really just up to us to self-police these things?
Yeah, it's a great question. Michael, we're both consultants. You know this better than I do, right? Like I had a mentor who would say, businesses do one of two things, or if they do both, it's amazing, right? I try to position myself doing both. They either save people time or they make them more money, right? And and so efficiency, saving people time, is it's the holy grail. It's if we can do more of that, then we can make our businesses more profitable, higher margin, better customer service, better ultimate competitive marketing. And so I just think for myself, I'm of course seeking efficiency in everything we build with AIexperts.com. Every custom automation, every implementation we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I imagine same for you, right? That's
Same.
probably the
Yeah.
ultimate goal of.
Yeah.
So then the question is, why would I, almost a hot take, say that efficiency is overhyped? Well, agreeing with what you said there, I think right now there's this prevailing sentiment that humans will be replaced by AI, right? And you've heard at this point a very tired quote. It's like, you won't be replaced by AI, you'll be replaced by another human who's using AI.
That's right.
But look, that quote is so tired. You've heard it. I'm sure everybody who's listening right now, they're nodding along. They're like, okay, I've heard that as well. We are all now, for the most part, the growth chart of ChatGPT is insane, right? There's no app that's been quite like the adoption that we've seen with ChatGPT. We all now have AI in our pockets, and so I think the efficiency curve. Yes, there are people who are using it better and faster, who are adopting things faster. Um, it's going to be very short lived. I think you'll have an advantage for a short time, and then we're going to see efficiency inflation. And if everyone becomes more efficient with AI, now the baseline has just moved.
Yeah.
And so this is the baseline. If your company's not using AI, if you're listening to this right now and you're thinking, man, like I've used ChatGPT once this entire month for my work, I'm telling you right now, you are definitively behind. Your team
Yeah.
needs some training. You need someone to come in and show you how to prompt engineer and how to get the best result immediately with AI models. ChatGPT off the shelf can deliver productivity improvement. I guarantee it. But you don't see people running around then and going, guess what? Like I've been Googling for 10 years. Google is on my resume. I'm a pro Googler. I'm more efficient than a shelf of encyclopedias that you have in your back office. Like nobody's going to say that.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that's what we're seeing with AI. Like it's going to be the baseline. You're not going to make now a new research deep dive across the World Wide Web, introducing multiple PDFs and academic sources into your research. You're not going to do that work without the help of an AI assistant, because if you do, you'll literally waste hundreds of hours that could have been better spent with the help of an AI assistant.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's now bringing up this idea of resetting the curve. To me, is really really critical, because many of us, myself included, yourself included, are helping companies try to get on the baseline curve, is what you're really describing. And the question is, when's the next inflection point? For me, I think there's really, really interesting data around some of the experiments that companies are running that are still not giving them the outputs that they want. And part of that is because it's still a person that has to run these queries. They have to run the prompts. They have to be comfortable with the data. They have to be comfortable with the questions, and then they have to be comfortable with the outputs. And I think the outputs for me brings up another topic around ethical AI, which is bias. And we all have bias. We all know a lot about bias. We get training on bias. We have our own biased beliefs about how much bias affects the world. So we could spend a lot of time on
Yes.
this. But because AI is now being designed, it's been designed by people. It could only start off knowing what we know. But as you mentioned, it's starting to evolve itself. How does bias start to influence the ethics of AI adoption and how we're interacting with it?
Yep. Yep. Great question. So I think there's a lot of ways that bias will now leak into our work, and we're hoping, right? The reason I mentioned Anthropic at the top of the hour is, they're doing a lot of work to hopefully mitigate and identify some of these biases, to code them out of their own models and out of their own data, to train them out of the data. That's a great thing. We need the foundation model providers to be held in check to do some of that work, but we can't rely upon them to do all of the work. So one example, you know, these things are moving quickly. An academic study that was worked into this AI for human flourishing report that we made. We did this report on, what are some of the signals of social connection and how social connection can be enhanced and not harmed by AI. One of the ways that AI is really, really hurting folks is with clear systemic biases, right? And um, I'm not I'm not an expert on bias. I really am not. But it's important to identify some of these studies and see. So in this case, 550 resumes were examined, and of those examined, 85% that were selected by an AI model that was grading resumes, they identified the names of the candidates, and 85% chose names that were white associated names. Then the remaining 11% chose female associated names, right? So you're already looking at how it's preferring males over females. It's preferring white over it's preferring white over black candidates. No black male names were favored in this study, not once. So again, I'm not an expert. I don't know how all this works deeply, but the important thing here is identifying, okay, let's just say your company wanted to do a resume review agent to help you with your recruiting. You get thousands of applications in, and you're like, this is a real request I've received, right? As an
This
automation
is
developer.
this is happening all the time. I mean, you see the number of folks that have come in. We've had this conversation a couple times, but the number of LinkedIn posts or other social posts I see about the number of applicants for a given job, and then B, the response of now AI engines evaluating AI written resumes, trying to figure out who's who. It's a real challenge in the hiring world.
Exactly, exactly. And applicant tracking systems, you can go Google it, ATS, right? There are systems right now sold into the market that are doing this, enterprises all over the world. And so hopefully they've seen a study like this and they go, okay, before we review a resume, we remove any indicators of geographic location that could prescribe bias. We remove indicators of, the person's name, of the person's gender, that could introduce bias, right? So hopefully these data pieces are removed strategically before being fed to a model that grades a resume. That way, the model that grades a resume is looking only at factors that are, unbiased and healthy. That's what you would hope. And there's a lot more that still needs to be done to ensure that there's no bias, of course. But I'm not sure that it is. Michael, I'm not sure that it is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, we've seen this. That study has been replicated in human populations many many times, and you've seen that through several studies that have been done. So the fact that it's happening within an AI model, I think again goes back to the topic that it's reflecting the orientations that we put into it, and how do we start to grade that out? Which I guess gets to another topic which I'm really interested in, and we've talked about this sort of relational AI concept, right? Not just how we relate to it individually, but sort of within itself, empathy, transparency, fairness versus output. So much of the I think the criticism of AI right now is the agreeableness factor, and you mentioned some of that. It's how do we get it to be really more challenge oriented? So what is relational AI, and what does that look like in practice?
Right. Such a good question, right? Relational AI, AI can be used, I think, to enhance human connection. And so I'll give you one example. I'm working right now with a client on a set of agents and automations that help their sales team. And there's maybe two different schools of thought on this. It's like, well, we have this powerful AI that can message people. What if we just unleash AI agents on people as salesmen, as your AI salesperson for your company? Somebody calls, they pick up the phone, they're looking for, American Express help hotline, and instead they get an AI robot that says, how can I assist you today? Personally, I'm not excited about that future at all.
I'm not
I'd
excited.
rather connect human to human. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
No, I hate virtual agents, and I was on one yesterday. My computer's having an issue, and it's just the most ineffective experience. And so you'd rather talk to a person, but it sounds like they're moving in the direction of moving call centers all the way to just virtual agents that are impersonating humans as AI agents.
Yeah, and it's so tempting, but I also think increasingly, I have a buddy of mine who, his entrepreneurial theory, he says, I'm going to go start a company where we provide human customer service 100% of the time. And we're just going to do that really well. And the more that these AI robots uptake in popularity, the more that the pendulum will swing and people are going to demand and be willing to pay more for real human service. And I think it's a great theory. I hope that's true, especially, but it might be a couple of hard years here where we learn just how aggravating it is to deal with robots. On the other hand, by the way, this client I was mentioning for sales stuff, what we're focused in on is how can we help then the human sales teams do better at what they already do best? Building real relationships with people, identifying customer needs, personalizing their outreach to them in a way that really counts, right? Where you send a message and you understand someone's, their baseball team in their local jurisdiction. You understand like exactly, what their family dynamic is, who their kids are, and what sports team they're playing on as well. And if you have that sort of information, not in a creepy big brother way, but in everything we do and have a conversation with on the phone is transcripted and logged back into our CRM. Now you have a personalized and a deep relationship at scale across thousands of customers. And so something like that, I actually identify that as a way to build deeper human connection, right? If you think about, the way to build a deeper memory or learning system for yourself, you're going to be taking notes in the call you have with a friend, and you'll take down those notes, and then a month later you'll go back and you look through and say, oh yeah, like a month ago Greg was saying that he's going to go on this trip. Let me text him and check up and see how that trip was. That sort of thing now you can begin to automate a little bit better, and I think that'll actually enhance our connection when it's applied to real phone calls, real in-person interaction, and hopefully just deeper touch points.
Yeah, I have a devil's advocate question with that. I agree, but I have a devil's advocate question, which is, we'll just take my every year I have a running list of things that I hear my wife say about things that she might want, and it's my gift list for her.
Okay.
And it is things that just come up. We just had twins 5 weeks ago, so she wanted a baby bag, and she brought this up before they were born, and so I found one. I wrote it down. I found one. There's virtue in the thoughtfulness of that experience. But if I just have the AI agent do it for me, if they're the shortcut to remembering the special moments, does it remove some of the specialness from just googling, 25 top gifts for new moms with twins, here's what you get type of thing? I don't know. What's your perspective on that? Because on the one hand, I think it's great to have a shortcut that allows us to not have to remember everything, because the truth is we forget most of those things, and so that's great. But does it take some shine off of the specialness of the real connection that took the time to remember something important about you?
Yeah, that's a great question, isn't it? Yeah, it's if you're giving a gift, it's the thought that counts. And And I think from a almost a philosophical perspective, you make a really interesting point. I also think though, as humans, man, we spend so much time just being forgetful and selfish that it might do us a lot of good if we had a little bit of help. You know, I could use an assistant that reminds me when someone's birthday is and to send them a message. And I can use a calendar that tells me, exactly when my anniversary is with, with a girlfriend or for folks on the call with a wife, right?
Yeah.
Or with a husband as well. I think these things are helpful. And I don't know. I mean, hopefully the assistants come along and make us all healthier and better connected and help us to do more of the real love that the world needs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really. I was just thinking about that as you were sharing it, and I was like, man, maybe I should not go ask ChatGPT for those recommendations. But the truth is, it does make it better. I mean, I think it's back to your comment about it's the thought that counts, and where is that relationship between what I offer up as an individual in our relationship as unique to me, and then where I get assistance, and then how much does the person on the other end of that experience, how much do they care? Does it matter to them? They're like, hey, I don't care if you found a shortcut. It's still just as meaningful to me. And I think that's part of the unique nature of these relationships. Lucas,
Agreeing with you super briefly, by the way, Michael, there is this authenticity tax that we study in the report, which is essentially that, where they did a study of Teams messages going back and forth in a company portal, and Teams messages that were identified or suspected to be AI generated, crafted with the help of AI, were deemed less socially valuable within the company. And so I
wow.
think folks are already onto that, right? They're already thinking, oh man, this is a great LinkedIn post, but I can tell that there's a little bit of zhuzhing here from the AI model and immediately they're docking points mentally in their subconscious for the post that you
Yeah.
just made, no matter how hard you might have worked on it, and even if AI was only given on the last 10%, people can tell.
Wow. I never thought of authenticity as a tax. That's a really interesting phrase. We should break that phrase down maybe some other time. We're almost at time here, Lucas. We could talk about this for hours, I'm sure, but I'd love to switch to the topic of teams. You work with a lot of teams and a lot of companies. I'd love to know what are they struggling with in adoption? What kind of advice are you giving to them? There's certainly policy, there's security, there's their own corporate security, there's safety, there's humans, there's this big mix of experimentation going on. What are you telling teams as they start to move into the adoption of AI more thoughtfully?
Yeah, yeah. I think sort of towards the middle of our conversation here, Michael, you mentioned how the results, the ROI that folks are getting from their AI investments is unclear, right? There's an MIT study that came out not that long ago, MIT NANDA. So it's an organization that's spun out of MIT focused in on building AI agent networks. Just want to clarify that, right? So they're AI researchers focused in on how to make AI productive that identified a lot of organizations aren't seeing ROI. One of the things they identified is that the organizations that are seeing ROI, they're seeing it simply by adopting some of these off-the-shelf tools, which are heavily already researched and invested, that
Hmm.
are really intuitive and easy to use. So what I would say is, looking at that study, looking at some comparable studies of efficiency gains from the likes of ChatGPT, if you install the enterprise license there, or Copilot, if you happen to be fully baked in the Microsoft ecosystem, or Anthropic, if you happen to be, say like a really skilled engineer. I know I personally love Claude Code for software engineering. So some of these tool sets, absolutely, you should be seeing 20 to 30% productivity improvement on your work from. And if you're not using them, chances are it's because your muscle in your organization, in your teams, hasn't encouraged enough experimentation and creativity about how you apply this to your own work and your own workflows. There's exceptions, right? Trades, crafts, and things like this. Like if you're a plumber, I understand why you might not need ChatGPT for your day to day, and I appreciate that your work is incredibly hands-on, unlike mine. But for the vast majority of knowledge workers, folks in New York here that are my neighbors and my clients, we really need to work on adopting these systems at scale from the bottom up. And so AI experts, we help with training. It's not complicated. It's frankly, everybody deserves a chance to catch up and get up to speed here. And to use now, it's almost like you've been promoted to being a manager, to use these AI assistants that are now at your fingertips to do more work and to do better work and to, hopefully see some of these feedback loops you have in your company where you're sending emails back and forth and verifying that things look good and doing QA and QC and doing all these complex processes. hopefully just reducing that down into a singular prompt. And that prompt, when it's built well enough, you can see just dramatically better outputs. These models are incredibly capable. I see organizations like hedge funds here in the city deploying these things to really do complex, multi-step reviews of large 60-page PDFs and files and things. The limitations of these models are expanding day by day and exponentially. And so I'll get off my soapbox and just say the time is now. Training is not that hard. I recommend everybody become an experimenter and just begin using these things daily.
Yeah, yeah. We have talked a lot, Lucas, on this conversation about a lot of topics, and I'd love to give you a chance to sort of synthesize down to the two or three big takeaways about the future of ethical AI and what it means for teams and employees and individuals. What are the 2 to 3 things you'd love for people to take away from this conversation about the future of ethical AI?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the first is that AI's impact on social connection, on human connection, is not neutral. We're all beginning to use this thing quickly and aggressively, and um, there are entirely intentional choices that we should be making about how we use this thing. And I would just appreciate anyone who raises their hand and says, I'm willing to spend an extra hour thinking about how this should be used, not just how it can be used. Because there's a lot of, I can give you a really long list of can, but should is hopefully much shorter. The other thing I'd love to share is that I think creativity, and this could be a hot take for some, but I think creativity is heightened with AI. Famously, Steve Jobs, he was selling creativity in the Macintosh more than he was selling a productivity machine to rival IBM's, for example. It was a creativity machine that sat on your desktop that turned your ideas as an artist or a creative or an entrepreneur into ideas plus plus. And I love that AI can also do the same. And so I would love for folks to think about it that way. Like, how do I take what creative ideas I already had? How do I elevate them? There are jobs that are already beginning to be replaced, right? Software engineering, myself, my own background and career, beginning to be replaced by AI models. However, now I can go and I can develop an app and an MVP for an app in record time. One weekend, what would have taken months beforehand, one weekend I can build an MVP for something. So your creativity has been enhanced. Don't think of it as attractive, think about it as a magic tool. And and then we've talked, Michael, so much about this stuff, but I just think, frankly, folks right now, the temptation is to do one of two things: either you adapt and you enjoy it, or maybe you're actually resisting, intentionally resisting. For the folks that are intentionally resisting, and I encounter a good handful of these folks. They're across organizations. People who maybe you've been a writer your whole career, and you don't believe in it because, frankly, writing is done better by humans, and I tend to agree. Uh, I would encourage those folks to lean in. I would want you guys, if you're on the call thinking right now, I'm never going to use AI because this is terrible for humanity. Please start using AI because we need more people like you to police the rest of us and tell us how it should be used. And I like that. I like that difference of opinions. I'm hoping that that creates a better society for us all.
Yeah, what a great reminder. And I think your first one, it's a phrase that I say quite often: just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I don't know that that question has been asked enough. I know it's been asked, and I'm not trying to sound like a Luddite and somebody who's, maybe on the fence of saying this is a bad thing, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. And sometimes you find that out too late. And it's hard to unring the bell for some of those things. Lucas, this has really been a great conversation. I want to get to your bonus question, as we always do. We have a closing tradition that the last guest leaves a question for the next guest. And your question is really about, not really about AI, but about teams and people that you lead. So what's an underrated tactic or strategy that you use that's had a real positive impact on the teams that you lead and the people that you affect?
I got to give a shout out. A mentor of mine at Deloitte, he recently actually jumped out in entrepreneurship. He's been an entrepreneur in the past. He's doing it again. Incredibly, just wise and thoughtful person in technology. But he approaches technology from a different perspective than most, and that's from storytelling. And so, shout out to Mike Bechtel, Deloitte's chief futurist. Now of course executive storyteller and advisor to many. I just wanted to share that storytelling is one of the most powerful tools. And maybe it sounds like Disney or something if you've read some of the Bob Iger stuff or some of the other Walt Disney works. I just think that the power and human connection of taking something that's as complex or maybe even as mundane as work and applying a lens of what's the lesson, that the historical lesson and the things that we can see echoed through time and all of this, and then how can we share that in a way that really resonates. I think that's a really inspiring lesson and one that I continually aspire to.
Yeah, it's great. Storytelling is, we are a social species. Storytelling is how societies have formed. It's how just about everything that we've built has transmitted across time. And I think it's a great reminder. Uh,
There you go.
yeah. So, Lucas, tell us more about where we can find you, some of the studies that you've referenced beyond LinkedIn, or if LinkedIn is the primary, where can folks follow you to learn more?
Yeah, please check me out on LinkedIn. This is Top Voice Tuesday after all, so that is the place where I post the most and I'm most engaged and active. I'll respond to any questions or messages there. If folks want to check out our website, it's simple. It's aiexperts.com. If folks want to, check out this report, the AI for Human Flourishing report, we'll make sure, Michael, as you mentioned, to share that in the links below and everything. But that's a good resource to learn about some of these trade-offs, right? We didn't just look at the pros, workplace productivity. We looked at ways that AI is helping workplace productivity and then also contributing to some social decline in real time. Both are happening right now, and hopefully we're all indexing for the productivity and improvements to society, not the bad stuff.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks again. It's really been a joy to have you on here. This topic will not go away. We're going to keep talking about it in 2026. I'm excited to let everyone know that this show is going to continue into 2026. There'll be a few tweaks. We're going to add a few things, some special episodes, a little bit of premium content for folks to be able to access. But thank you for being part of the Top Voice community. This has really been a great journey for us. Lucas will make sure to include all your links so people can reach out to you, and we're excited to have you follow us going forward. Please do subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. This episode will be up on YouTube here shortly. Thanks again, Lucas, for everything, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Michael.